Hi there, it's Tracy Kiernan from stepbysteppainting.net, and we have a simple painting tutorial of a heart daisy with two bees, Valentine's Day theme. You're welcome to change the lettering of it to be more like a year-round painting, and you can change the background. So the background is this really pretty Prism Violet color. However, if you want to do like a blue background or a turquoise background, like this turquoise would look really pretty, or even a light blue color to mimic the sky would look really pretty as well. So you're welcome to change that up. There's only 5 colors in this, so we have Cad Yellow Medium, Prism Violet, Titanium White, Mars Black, and Raw Umber. I used 5 brushes for this, although some of these brushes are optional. So we have a 3/4 inch flat wash brush. I also use this blender brush. This blender brush is completely optional. It's if you want to do like a smooth background, but you do not have to use that brush. A 4 round brush was used in the petals and the bees, and then this detail brush was actually really helpful for some of the detail work in the bees. So this is a 3/0 round brush. If you have a black paint pen and a white paint pen, perhaps that might be helpful for some of the detail work as well. I also used this bristle brush. So I like to use this brush when there's some texture involved. So there's some texture in the middle of the daisy. It's just a round bristle brush with natural hairs. If you don't have a bristle brush, you can try the technique with Q-tips. A paper plate is helpful because I'm actually going to be tracing a half circle, or almost a half circle, with a piece of chalk, and that helped with the petals, making sure that they're even and going around a circle. Let's go ahead and get started. I have Prism Violet and Titanium White on my palette. I'm going to load my brush in an equal amount of both of those colors. Let's start in the center and let's just do these big angle brush strokes with the intention just to kind of fill up the canvas fast. And so the center part is going to be lighter, and as I work my way kind of on the outer parts, I'm going to do more of that darker color, more of that pure violet. But I'm just going to let that blend on the canvas. Get some more white in the center, so big angled brush strokes. So if you are going to be using the blender brush, that would be to kind of help smooth the paint strokes out. So if you don't want to see those angled brush strokes, I'll show you how you can smooth those out. Sometimes I like to use the blender brush for backgrounds because it gives you that kind of pretty airbrushed look. I'm going to continue to just kind of fill this up. I'm not going to fill the whole canvas just yet. I'm just doing the center part and not the sides yet. So then I'll get my blender brush. This is just it's actually a makeup brush. It's like a foundation blender brush, but I use it a lot for painting. So I just take this brush. There's no paint, there's no water, it's just dry. And I'm using that to lightly blend my paint on the canvas. So it gives you that kind of swirly, soft, sort of airbrushed look. Again, it is completely optional. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. You can just do the big angled blended paint strokes and you'll be fine. So I'm just going to go ahead and add more of this pure purple to the edges because I want the outer parts to be a little bit darker. This is a technique I do a lot with backgrounds that have like maybe something simple on the painting, but when you do a lighter color in the center, it really helps to create contrast with whatever object you're going to be painting. So I'm just take my brush and just blend that outwards. More Prism Violet on my paint palette, and I'm just basically going to fill up the rest with this. Did not rinse my brush at all, so there's still some of the titanium white on my brush, and that's okay. The goal is basically just to get it to be a little bit lighter in the center and darker towards the edges. So when we're done, we want to let this dry, get all our brushes rinsed off, set to the side, and I'm going to use a piece of chalk to draw the center of the daisy. Since it's a Valentine's Day theme, I'm going to do a heart for the center instead of a circle. If you want it to be more of a year-round design, you can do this as a circle instead of a heart. So part of the heart is cut off, so it's just the top part. We don't see the bottom of it. I'm going to use a paper plate. So this is a 9-inch diameter paper plate. If you have something similar, you can use that or use a compass. And I'm just kind of trying to find the center of that heart and make sure that this is centered. So it's pushed up a little bit higher. So it's not exactly half of the circle. It's a little bit higher than half. And I'm doing the line. So this is going to just kind of help be a guideline for me. It'll help with how long I want each of the petals to be to make them kind of even. So I'm going to load my palette with black, and I'll be using titanium white and the number 4 round brush. I am going to be mixing a light gray color. So I'm going to take some of this white, a teeny tiny bit of black, and maybe even a little bit of purple, some of that Prism Violet. I am making our daisy petals that are going to be in the back first. So I'll be painting those first, and those ones are a little bit more shadowy. That's why I'm making kind of a grayish, a light gray color with a little bit of purple in there. This is the number 4 round brush, by the way. So when I have my light kind of purple gray color, I am going to start painting my petals. So pick a spot to start at and paint kind of this oval shape that's kind of narrow at the base. It goes rounded and a little bit more narrow at the end. So I went outside of that chalk line, and that's okay. It's a guideline, and I decided I wanted my petals to be a little bit longer than that line. So I'm going to make each of them go outside of that line a little bit. So with each of these gray petals, remember these are the behind the petals in the back. So we want to leave a gap in between because the gap is where our front petals are going to be, and those are going to be done with more of the pure white color. So each of these are very similar in shape and size. We start out narrow, and then it goes wide, and then it goes narrow again. When you get to a little bit awkward because we're not working on a circle, we're working on a heart, so we want to still have petals that could be attached to this top part of the heart. So I put this one over here. So again, it starts out kind of narrow, goes rounded and a little bit wide, and a little bit narrow again. As you mix more colors for your petals, you might find that your gray shades might vary a little bit, and that's okay. This one ended up being a little bit darker than the others, and that's okay. We can always have it be dark, and we can always add lighter color on top of it. You might find that you want to add just a little bit of water to the brush. That kind of helps thin the paint down a little bit, gets it to flow a little bit better. So again, make sure with each petal that you're leaving a little bit of a gap in between. We're still doing all of the back petals. Some of these might overlap my heart a little bit, and that's okay because when we paint the heart part, that part is going to go over any part of the petal that might have gone over the line of the heart. So we're going to do another one. Using that chalk line as a guideline, I'm making each of them kind of go outside of the line a little bit, but it's narrow at the base, goes wide, and then narrow again. So you can kind of sketch it out with your brush at first. So as we start getting to these petals that are going off the canvas, you could paint the side of the canvas if you want, but some of these petals you don't really see the whole thing, so we're just going to kind of like drag our brush outwards, and same thing right here. So those are all the in between or the behind petals. We want to rinse our brush off, and now let's use pure titanium white. I'm actually, before I paint the front petals, because I want these to kind of dry a little bit, I'm actually going to take my white, and on the ends of each of these petals, I'm going to drag in some of this pure white color. Creates a little bit of texture on the petal, but also lightens up this part so that it becomes more shadowy towards the bottom. But we have this bright kind of white that blends at the top. Just dragging it down, blending it in with that gray. I'm only doing this on the end, on the tip of the petal. So I'm going to do this to each of them. So this one, kind of that darker petal in there. So I'm going to blend that in. This one. Just dragging that brush down, but I'm not covering up all of that darker gray color. So I would recommend you let this dry a little bit before we're doing our front petals, because we don't want the front petals to blend too much with our gray petals. So when you're ready for your front petals, you want to go ahead and load your number 4 round brush in just the titanium white and start anywhere. So we're going to pick a spot, and we're going to start down here in between 2 of the gray petals. And as I paint this petal, it's going to overlap 2 of the gray petals. So same shape, but we're overlapping it. And it's going to now create some depth in our petals and overlapping, because this one looks lighter and the ones next to it that are behind it are already shadowy. So same thing. You can, if it helps, you can kind of like outline the shape of the petal and then fill it in. I'm not really doing shading or anything right now. I'm just doing solid white, although there's still maybe a little bit of gray that's kind of dragging on my brush, and maybe from the palette, and that's okay. Again, we can always go back and add lighter color if it becomes not bright enough from having a little bit of that gray in there. So I'm just repeating this for all, these are all the front petals, and they're all going to be overlapping all of the back petals that we painted first. Next, I'm going to add a little bit of shadowing on the base of some of these brighter white petals. So I have this gray color again on my brush without rinsing off. I'm just going to take this gray color and just lightly kind of drag it from the bottom and blend it up, create these kind of lines on the petals that kind of softly blend with the rest of the white. So you don't want to go too dark with this. We don't want to lose the fact that these are front petals, so they're brighter. Just a little bit of shadow on the bottom. Just drag it up into the rest of the petal. Then I'm going to load my palette with some more fresh titanium white. Rinse my brush off. I want to get all that gray off of this round brush. And I'm going to go back with more of this pure white and really on the edges of each of these petals, I want to outline the edges. This is going to really brighten up your front petals and make them stand out against our back petals that are darker. Some of these, we can take the ends of the petals and kind of curve them different directions. Kind of gives it that look that the petal is maybe kind of bending a little bit. Gives it a little bit of character in some of these petals so they're not all exactly identical. So that's what I'm doing here on the ends of some of these front petals. Just taking that white and kind of on the end, bending them one way. We could go back and do that to some of the back petals as well, but I decided not to do that. So next, let's load our palette with the color Raw Umber. We are going to be painting the heart center part of our daisy, and let's use a clean, rinsed number 4 round brush. So the first thing we're going to do before we texture this center up is do a nice dark base layer. So I'm taking the brown and I am painting the heart. So if any part of the petals are overlapping, at this point we would make sure that this brown heart is in front and covering up any of the base of the petals. You may also find that your petals aren't all touching the center part, so you may have to go back and kind of extend your petals. So basically just one solid coat of solid brown. So next I'm going to rinse the brown off of my brush, and I'm going to go back and extend some of these petals that do not touch the center. So like right here, I'm just going to take that white and extend it. I can even grab my gray and go back with these back petals. So all the petals are touching the center, but the center heart is on top of the base of all of the petals. So let's let that center dry and let's work on the two bees in this painting next. So I have cadmium yellow medium and titanium white onto my palette, and you'll need a clean number 4 round brush. Let's start by mixing yellow and white together. You'll want to mix yellow and white together because it's going to show up better on the canvas if you have that white mixed within that yellow, because yellow tends to be a see-through color and we want this to be nice and bright. So I'm going to first paint a circle for the thorax of the bee, so just a solid yellow circle. And then the same color, I'm going to do the abdomen. So this is more like an egg shape. It's pointed on the end for the stinger. So we have a circle and like this sort of like teardrop shape attached to it. Then I'm going to rinse the brush and add a little bit of white to it, specifically in the center to just kind of like highlight it a little bit. So titanium white. And this might be kind of hard to do because that yellow is still very wet. So I'm just going to kind of dab my brush with the white just in the center, and little white dots that kind of blend with that yellow so that our center part of both the circle and that teardrop shape are lighter. Next, I'm going to paint the head of the bee. So rinse, grab Mars Black. We're going to do a little half circle shape. It's attached to the thorax, so a little half circle. So this is his head. I am going to now switch to my little detail brush. This is that 3-0 round brush, and this is much more easier to use for this small shape than that 4 round. And this is also where I said that if you have like a black paint pen, you might enjoy using that for these tiny, tiny details. I'm going to do the 2 antennae, and these are thick at the end and then they get thinner. So I put more pressure on the brush and then I release so the line goes thinner. And then I'm going to do the little stinger on the end. So just very, very small strokes, almost like there's a stripe right here on the end, and then it goes to a point so we can see the little stinger. And then I'm going to do the stripes. So each little stripe is like a little little strokes. I'm making this going in a curved direction, so it's curving upwards. And then I'll do another stripe. So if you have room for more stripes, you can. I'm not going to do the stripes on the abdomen. I'm going to leave that yellow. So this is also curved, but I'm doing little tiny paint strokes that are going vertically to create the stripe. And then over here on the head, adding just a little bit more black just on the bottom part of the head. So then I'm going to do the legs of the bee, starting with the front legs. So still using the 3-0 round brush and the Mars Black. And I'm going to do the front legs. So these 2 little curved lines. So keep in mind that later on we'll be doing the wings. So some of this might actually be covered by the wings. So there's the back legs, and I'm not going to do the middle legs because the middle legs are going to be covered up anyway. So it's going to look a little weird without the wings, but we got to wait for all this to dry before we can paint those wings. So I'm going to repeat this and do another bee on the left side. And you're definitely welcome to do more bees. I'm just doing 2 for this. So same exact technique, starting with the circle for the yellow and white, and then doing your little teardrop shape for the body, abdomen. Then add some titanium white to your brush and add a little bit of white in the center. Blend that in with the rest of the yellow. Then rinse your brush and get Mars Black onto the brush. Paint a little half circle for the head. Then do the antennae. So start out by pressing hard with the brush and release the pressure so it's thicker towards the end, thinner at the base, and do your legs. So these ones are just curving forwards, and the back ones are going to be curving the opposite way. If you want to change the legs or have the middle leg show, you can. I just did front and back. Then we can do the stinger. So back here, like a little point. So if that yellow's too wet, you may want to let it dry a bit before going in and doing these stripes. The black little tiny dashed lines for the stripes that are going in a curved direction, and same with right here. And I'll just kind of extend the head a little bit. We could also add eyes on the bees, so we can do that by taking our titanium white and doing 2 dots. You can decide if you like how that looks or not. You can always go back and paint over it if you don't like how that looks. So while the bees are drying, I'm going to gently erase my chalk that's going between our little petals. So this is just a soft baby wipe. You just want to gently erase the chalk without lifting off any of the layers of paint. That also works with a clean wet paintbrush to get rid of chalk lines. Next, I'm going to do the texture on the center part of the daisy, and this is a bristle brush. I don't know if that's the official name for this brush, but it has the natural kind of hairs on it, so it's textured, it's not soft, it's rounded. You can also do this technique with what's called a stencil brush, which is very similar to this. You can also try this by bundling up Q-tips together and using that. So we're going to actually, on our palette, mix brown and yellow together. So about equal parts brown and yellow. We want to start off dark and work our way up to get lighter and lighter. So right now we're just dabbing that dark yellow color. And it should be dark. It shouldn't be showing up bright at all. In fact, if it's too bright, you may want to go back and add more brown in it. But fill up the entire heart shape with this color. Just dabbing my brush over the entire shape. We still want a lot of that dark brown first layer still showing through, so it should be relatively dark still. Then, without rinsing your brush, grab yellow and white. So this is going to start showing up brighter. Add this just in the center part. And just a little bit. It should still be not the brightest, but it should be definitely a few shades brighter than our first layer. And be very, very gentle. Add only a little bit on the outer parts, but add more in the center parts because we're trying to get the center part of this to be brighter and the outer parts to be darker. That's going to give it that really pretty dimension with that shape. Then load your brush in some white and go and do it again, but just in the center. So we want to brighten up our center even more with that little bit of white. So you can add it on the outer parts, but we're mostly brightening the center and we're just kind of blending it with the outer parts. So it's darker on the edge and brighter in the center. Let me go back and maybe add some more yellow towards the edge, but still keeping it dark. And we can go outside the line. So you can take your little stippled strokes and have some of that paint go outside the edges of that heart without losing that heart shape. So some of those little paint dots can actually overlap parts of the bottom of the petals. I'm going to take more of the yellow and white and add a little bit more in the center. We should still see our first layer of brown kind of all throughout. We still see some brown in the center of the heart where it's bright. So you don't want to overdo that sponging technique. So go ahead and rinse your brush, and I'm going to just go back over my petals next with titanium white. So these petals are very dry now, and I'm just adding another layer of bright, pure white along the edges of the front petals. So this is going to really help get our petals to stand out, kind of pop, since they're next to those shadowy petals. So just kind of like a second coat of paint just on the edges. I'm also going to touch up some of the back petals, but not try to paint them white all the way. They still should have that shadowy color, so I don't want to go over my shadowy color. But on the ends of those petals, we can take the white and just kind of drag a little bit more white. So some of this white actually bled into the yellow on my palette, which actually worked out kind of nice. If you want to add just a teeny tiny bit of yellow to some of this white, that actually looks really pretty, especially with the gray. Next, we are going to paint the wings of our bees, and you want to make sure that they are both very, very dry. I'm going to get all my brushes rinsed off and set to the side, and I'll be using titanium white, so you want some fresh titanium white that's not mixed with anything right now, and the number 4 round brush. So load it into titanium white, kind of wipe off the brush. So we want to try our best to kind of make this layer of white be a little bit translucent. For it being a bee wing, we should see kind of that color through this layer of white. So I am lightly sketching my first wing shape. It's just kind of like an oval shape that's kind of pointed on the top and bottom of it. And then, so see how sort of translucent that is. You can create that effect by just very, very lightly pressing with your brush, kind of sketch-like motions. It's not super thick paint. It's not opaque. We can see that color through that layer of paint. So I did 2 wings on each side, and then I'm going to do another set of wings. So this one actually I made a little bit more opaque because it's overlapping that first set. So I'm going to take this and kind of do a little bit more of a rounded but smaller wing. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And then let's repeat that for our other bee. So starting with the first set of wings, try to make your paint translucent by pressing very, very lightly. So these wings are kind of going out horizontally. And then the second set, it's kind of going diagonally, pointing down, and that one was a little bit brighter, a little bit more white on the brush, maybe a little bit more pressure on the brush to get that to be brighter. And then the next set of wings, same thing. Next, I am going to decide to cover up the eyes and do something different. So you can do this too. So I just went back over that with Mars Black, and I have this is the 4-round brush, although you can do this with the tiny detail brush. And I'm just going to do a highlight on the one side instead. So it gives it this kind of like shiny look. Next, I'm going to do the lettering in this. So this is just a regular chalk pencil. You can use a drawing pencil or any kind of pencil. I just like to kind of write my letters out first before I paint them in. And I'm going to have this say, "Be mine." So you are welcome to change this. You can have it say, "Be joyful," "Be happy." It could be more like a year-round painting instead of a Valentine's Day theme. So, and then I also did the little trail. The letters are connecting to the bees. And then, so I'm going to use the 3-0 round brush in titanium white to paint my lettering. If you want, you can use a paint pen for this. So the black would actually show up, but I like the contrast of the white or whatever color you want it to do. So I am just going to use this brush to paint all of the lettering in the little trail connected to the letters. The one downside about doing it with this brush is I find that I'm loading it into the paint often. You can try to maybe add a little or thin down the titanium white a little bit, so that might let it last longer or increase the flow of the paint. But I really like how bright this white paint is. So the white Posca paint pens, for me, they don't ever get this bright. So the titanium white definitely is a little bit better in that sense. So I'm actually going to add another E on this instead of it just being one E. Since it's a B theme, I'm going to have it say B-E-E. I'm actually going to erase this and do a second letter E, and then I'll have to redo the mine part as well. So these chalk pencils will wipe off easily. You can also use a regular eraser to erase these chalk pencils. But then again, you don't have to use the chalk pencil. You can write it out with a regular pencil. And then I'll go ahead and paint the rest of the lettering for this. This little dashed trail can be a little bit more decorative than this. You can have it loop around a bit more if you want. And I'm going to add, actually kind of with the white kind of loosely outlining the edges of the top wing and then adding a brighter layer to that highlight. Another touch up I'm going to do is just add some more texture in the background. So I'm going to take my 3/4 flat and just the purple. I just want to kind of darken some of the edges just to kind of put some more dark tones in the background along the edges, and the center part is still going to remain bright. But I'm not going to use the blender brush for this. I'm just going to do these angled strokes, and maybe they're kind of dry brush towards the center, but just a little bit of dark along the edges. A little bit of texture under the lettering, but again, I don't want to mess with the fact that that center part should be nice and bright. You can erase any leftover chalk lines from your lettering, just very gently. Some other things you can do to your painting for final touch-ups, you can paint the sides. So I went ahead and off camera painted the sides of my canvas purple. You could extend your flower petals off the edges of the canvas. That would look really pretty. I also wanted to add these really pretty yellow dots. This is yellow and white, and using the 3 round brush, I'm just doing little yellow dots kind of scattered throughout the background just to add something else in the background. And this is the conclusion of how to paint Be Mine. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.